3 of those reserve seats are now
open? Oh, they are. Okay, that's good to know. There's the second row here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Was the family good? Yeah.
Yeah, so I talked to Charles after this one here. I'll go up and get those programs he needs. I'll look up and have him sign it up.
Oh.
And I'll have him sign yours too.
Yeah.
So.
It's 5 times the work. Felix.
Yeah.
Boy.
I wish I had my Screening Life book.
5 times the work.
My Charles Pearson book. I have it at home.
I got that too. You know what? I'm gonna have David break the facts down.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's all like one big long back.
Yeah.
He knows how to do it to cut them all up, and that'd be a lot better.
But he's just like, I mean, this morning it's like, I was like, Hot Wheels, Play-Doh. Because Monch had to go into work this morning, so it's like, you know, one thing, the one thing to the next.
That was a good show too. Jack was played down at McCoy.
I don't know why he wasn't there. He has no excuse.
It was my birthday.
Well, what better way to celebrate it than be there? That was a great show. All 3 bands were killer.
I was going to go see Survival Nights.
We just saw the first one.
You should definitely go check out Survival Night if you haven't seen him yet.
Yeah, I haven't
So
seen it
excited.
yet.
I actually have a picture.
I'll watch your stuff coming up.
I think they're next. They're playing in Olympia.
Thank you, sir.
My favorite pictures is like, yeah, my wife took one last one on Facebook
And we got the video.
about 10 minutes.
Hey, no problem. I have some more at home too, but I have to dig them out. Some more shows.
Really?
Yeah. I've been to almost all yours, pretty much.
Give me all the ones you've been to.
I bet you have more. I bet you I do.
5 or 6. I might have to actually look.
Yeah, I don't know. Yours are better than mine, but I think I need to brighten them up a little bit. I mean, that one there, I give you the raw recording,
That's fine.
but that's your job, so you can make them sound better.
I can deal with it. Just give it to me the way it is. That's fine.
No problem.
If I need to use it, I'll, you know.
Okay.
Cool. And then he has a.
Why does that thing look fuzzy now? Is it just me? Is it clear? It says slightly blurry almost.
Yeah.
I don't know why it's doing that. Oh, that was cool. That went off. I just let the camera go and I got video. I big pan a shot of how many people were in there and stuff. And they went down the hallway and all that. It just makes it more exciting, you know? Yeah, his other deal, it seemed like they just did too, but set myself on fire, so it's a big 12-inch one. But they only made 500 of them, so I got number 500 out of 500. I got the very last one.
There's a couple of that, or I mean, a lot of them.
This is weird. I know that that was weird.
Yeah. Where was that girl from?
I don't know. She said she was one of Leland's pen pals, but she watches all the pictures and stuff I used to post on.
Well, thanks for coming back. That happens every once in a while, you know. So I totally don't remember at all what we were talking about. Why don't we? What's that? Oh. Jack? Oh, okay. Moving along. Well, why don't we play a clip from Megan Jasper right now, and we'll go on after that for a bit. No, they were on.
Had a cassette copy.
So that was a good
I remember vividly when Kurt Cobain died. I was a sales rep at ADA at the time, and ADA was the distributor that sold Sub Pop and so many other great independent labels, and I had the Northwest as my branch. Fred Meyer's was a chain store, and when I went in to sell records, they would oftentimes buy hundreds and hundreds of the records that I sold. They did very well with Nirvana's Bleach. They did really well with Mudhoney, Green River, a lot of the grunge stuff. They sold a lot of. I went into Fred Meyer's. It was always kind of a trip because you sit in this lobby and there are all of these country stars' autographs on the wall, on this white wall with a plant in front of it. And there were lots of gold records and platinum records also on the wall. And that didn't look like any of the other offices that I went into. So it was always a trip. And then I would be moved from the lobby into an area where this woman Laura sat, and Laura worked with Don Jensen, who was the main buyer for Fred Meyer's. And Laura was super sweet, but she would always warn me. She would say, "Be careful today, Megan. Don is a bear." Usually when Laura told me Don was a bear, it meant good fucking luck, you're walking out with jack shit today. As I sat in Don's office, he had the end on, and he never had the radio on when I was sitting there. And he said to me, "Did you hear about Kurt Cobain?" Because he knew that I sold that stuff. And I said, "No." And he said, "Kurt Cobain killed himself." And he put the volume up on the radio, and I heard that there was a body that was found in the house. It had not been identified. There was a gunshot wound to the head. And I sat there and I was in complete shock. But to be brutally honest, I didn't think it was Kurt's body. I thought it was Dylan Carlson. Because I knew that I had heard that Kurt was in rehab in California, and Dylan was over there so much anyways, and Dylan had access to guns. He had a lot of guns, and Dylan was just not in a great space, and Dylan was a good friend of mine, and so when I was sitting in that office and listening, I didn't want it to be Kurt, but I also really didn't want it to be Dylan. And I kept sitting there thinking, this is awful, because someone had died, and it was either Kurt or Dylan. But I needed to know. I really needed to know. And anyway, Don ordered more Nirvana CDs than I'd ever sold, ever. And I walked out, and I had in those days, in the good old days, when you got a sales order, it was on a piece of paper. And I walked out with this flimsy piece of paper with their order, and it was the grossest moment of my working life. Because that order, it's a light piece of paper, and it felt so heavy. I mean, it was the hugest order I'd ever gotten. I knew that probably meant that our West Coast sales team was all going to get a bonus. And I felt fucking sick to my stomach. It was awful. It was just awful. I went straight from the Fred Meyer office to the airport because everybody from ADA was flying into Seattle for the Sub Pop anniversary party, and many of them were staying at my house. And I was worried sick because I didn't know who had died. And I went and picked up, my coworkers, And the thing that you learn when people die, no matter how they die, is that everybody has such an incredibly different relationship with death and their ability to grieve, and in this case, money. And a lot of people make comments that just show where they're at mentally and emotionally with all of these things. And I felt like I was just surrounded with it.
It's a really heavy clip there. But I mean, I think what she says at the end, I mean, just that people having very different sort of relationships to death and, you know, and reactions to that. And I'm sure that's something that all of you guys experienced at the time as well.
What I thought at the time was, this is complex. I said that to Chris at the memorial. I said, this is complex. I don't know how to process it. Because there was just so much stuff flying around in my mind on so many levels. It's very difficult. I still don't know how to process it. I think to some extent we all have a little bit of PTSD about this.
Well, I've never really told anyone this before, but at the private memorial, I cried and I cried and I cried, and I actually cried as much for Kurt as I did for my own father's suicide. And so, yeah, it hit me really, really hard at that time. And yeah, I heard about it with a phone call from Entertainment Weekly, and on call waiting was Rolling Stone, and it sort of went like that for a few days. And I figured, well, Kurt would want to be remembered by my photographs, and it's sort of my job, you know. And yeah, it was just every time.
My friend Calvin Johnson gave me a call from Olympia and told me what had happened. And I was shocked to a certain extent and feeling grief, but for me, I had kind of seen this coming. Okay. I remember a month prior turning on the news, and there's Kurt being rushed to the hospital in Rome because he had just tried to kill himself. That was just a month earlier. The last time I saw him prior to that was in December of '93. Nirvana did a performance down on the pier for MTV. I'm sure some of you folks were there. And personally, I remember seeing the show, and Kurt seemed, to me, somewhat lifeless, okay? That the joy of performing was gone. And that's what I noticed. And so I could just sense that kind of retreat over a period of time with all the insanity of his success and all what was going on in his personal life. So there was this long trajectory of withdrawal, attempted suicide, and then the final suicide. It was sadness, but it was sadness that I had experienced over a long period of time.
And you know, I had the eerie experience of being at the Rocket, and we were putting a magazine out that day on deadline, and Courtney Love was on the cover, and we were waiting for an interview with her that she kept not showing up for or not calling in for. And then I did local music things on the station KXRX locally, and that's the station that got the tip-off from the electrician. So at the moment the police were called, KXRX were calling me and said, do you think this could be true? I think that what Bruce is saying, though, speaks to some degree to something that isn't often said, is that, you know, Kurt was already dying to some degree. He was, and he's dead, and you can honor his memory, but you also have to say that there were choices he was making, and that what happened in April of 1994 was one of several different suicide attempts. And when I look at it, and certainly drug addiction is a long, slow suicide attempt, I still find something very admirable, though, ultimately out of that, separate from any feelings I have towards suicide, which frankly is only empathy for somebody that felt that much pain that they got to that place. what I look at, and there are people here that grew up in Aberdeen, the world that Kurt grew up in, the shack that he literally lived in when he grew up in, this place we're seeing here where he lived, the poverty, the difficulty he had with his family. You know, I was in Aberdeen recently and a couple people were here, and the Schillingers, who were his foster parents, were there. And they said that, they came up afterwards and said there were lots of kids through their house, but for the year and a half that Kurt was there, neither of his family, no one in his family ever inquired about him when he was a teenager for a year and a half. And that just almost makes me cry to even think about. When I look at his life and what he accomplished, the fact that he got out of that house and that world and created those songs and made that music is an unbelievably incredible, impossible task. And that's why I admire him. All the other pain, all the end of it, it doesn't matter. That he ever got his ass off and did something, given what he had against him, starting with, is an unbelievable story. And that's one reason that the death doesn't even matter. It doesn't matter how he died or when he died. It's what he did when he was alive and that he created something.
Let's open it up to some questions. Anyone? All right, well, that's good. Well, we'll transition to the signing portion if anybody wants to attend that, and that'll be up in the lounge area. So you'll go out this way, and there'll be people that'll show you how to get up there, and we'll exit out the way. But thank you very much for coming.
It's just